A governmental colossus bound and encompassed by weaponized personnel. Blazing photography devices, a multitude of advocates vocalizing externally insisting clarifications. Julius Malema, one of South Africa's most contentious characters, was being conducted away by enforcement at Otambo International Airport. This apprehension has dispatched rumors across the country, elevating inquiries about the junction of administration, legislation, and communal reliance. Today, we'll deconstruct the episodes that contributed to this theatrical instant, scrutinize the juridical and foundational barriers Malema now encounters, and investigate 3 plausible conclusions that could either consolidate his crusade or sabotage it thoroughly. The airport tableau was disorderly from the inception. Malema had recently emerged from a Pan-African symposium in era when safety staff boarded by substantially weaponized constabulary neared him at the landing zone. Spectators relayed a tense deadlock enduring almost 20 intervals as his juridical crew, previously warned to the forthcoming apprehension, hastened to the venue. Footage acquired on handheld instruments display Malema maintaining steadfast, discoursing to a swelling multitude of advocates and chroniclers. He proclaimed that no coercion could mute the economic freedom fighters' transmission. The apprehension mandate distributed hours antecedently by a Johannesburg arbitrator indicted him regarding orations executed during latest demonstrations. What rendered this apprehension conspicuous was how exposed it was. Powers could have discreetly confined mail, but alternatively orchestrated a pageant at a principal airport. Censurers instantly inquiry whether this was enforcement implementation or administrative spectacle designed to terrorize and dispatch a notification to his advocates. To grasp why this instant is so weighty, it's vital to recognize who Julius Malema is. Originated in 1981 in Seshiko Township proximate Polokwane, he elevated from indigence to become one of South Africa's most commanding administrative pronouncements. He initiated his vocation in the African National Congress Youth League, ultimately becoming its director and securing a distinction as a valiant proponent for extremist fiscal modification. His petitions for terrain appropriation without remuneration and for monopolizing tactical enterprises rendered him a protagonist to countless disenfranchised South Africans and a menace to embedded fiscal dominions. Subsequent to being ejected from the ANC in 2012, Malema instituted the Economic Freedom Fighters, a faction amalgamating Marxist-Leninist and Pan-Africanist philosophies. It swiftly became the territory's third most substantial administrative vigor. Malema's scarlet cap and militaristic garments became insignias of defiance for youthful jobless South Africans disillusioned by the post-apartheid regime. His assemblies attract myriads and his orations frequently transmitted extensively articulate the exasperations of those forsaken by fiscal disproportion. The indictments against Malema concentrate on purported stimulation to aggression during demonstration concentrating alien-possessed establishments indicted of capitalizing South African laborers. Prosecutors maintain his discourse promoted unlawful terrain appropriation and disrupted communal arrangement, accentuating expressions encouraging advocates to retrieve what they acknowledge is theirs by whatever methods requisite. These indictments summon the Writers' Assembly Statute, a statute tracing rearward to apartheid engineered to penalize discourse probable to instigate turbulence. Juridical authorities swiftly remarked the paradox. A statute formerly employed to quell anti-apartheid militants is presently being administered to someone professing to advance that endeavor. The prosecution must substantiate that Malema's utterances constituted an instantaneous and authentic hazard rather than merely articulating disputed viewpoints safeguarded under the foundational manuscript. His advocacy maintains that his orations were allegorical, fragment of an extensive legacy of insurrectionary terminology planned to galvanize administrative reaction, not stimulate concrete aggression. They have contested the foundational legitimacy of employing this antiquated statute in contemporary administrative circumstances. At the nucleus of the controversy is an inquiry the tribunals have never thoroughly adjudicated. Where does inflammatory administrative discourse transition into unlawful stimulation? Legislative immunity introduces another stratum of elaborateness. As a functioning associate of the National Assembly, Malema is exempted from prosecution for pronouncements executed within legislature. Nevertheless, the indictments pertain to orations at communal assemblies, situating him in a juridical ambiguous territory. Leadership proposes the safeguard is restrictively administered. Ex-leader Jacob Zuma's endeavors to broaden it were rebuffed by the tribunals. Malema's crew maintains that administrative mobilization and interaction with electors is inseparable from legislative obligation and should relish comparable safeguard. If the tribunals repudiate this, chosen authorities could encounter prosecution for customary campaign endeavors, establishing a freezing impact on administrative discourse. Within intervals of May's apprehension, the economic freedom fighters assembled, exhibiting their institutional capability. Faction guidance designated the apprehension a frantic deed by anxious authority, proclaiming countrywide demonstrations and a 1 million individual procession to the Confederation structures insisting his liberation. Associates of legislature menaced to disrupt deliberations until their commander was emancipated with multiple compulsorily expelled, converting legislative insubordination into a communal exhibition. The faction social platform mechanisms proceeded into maximum capacity. Circulating identifiers internationally and depicting the apprehension as fragment of a more extensive suppression on reformist African crusades. And critical juridical reservoir accumulated countless currency within 24 intervals. This reaction was manifestly preconceived, mirroring years of arrangement for altercation. South Africa swiftly became dichotomized in municipalities and casual communities. Numerous perceived the apprehension as verification the mechanism is manipulated against those insisting fiscal fairness, sketching comparisons to the apparent epic muting of Steve Bow, Nelson Mandela, and associates. Concurrently, bourgeois South Africans, commercial commanders, and resistance administrators embraced the apprehension, disputing that the statute must maintain commanders accountable for inflammatory discourse. International spectators remarked that endorsement predominantly mirrors South Africa's fiscal inequality. Those who have profited from the mechanism prefer accountability while the disenfranchised perceive male as a protagonist being quelled. This apprehension also contacts a distressing chronicle arrangement. Throughout apartheid, apprehensions were habitually employed to neutralize administrative resistance. Even subsequent to 1994, administratively influenced juridical responses, frequently depicted as depravity or criminal instances, have ignited skepticism about intentions. What renders Malema's circumstance distinctive is that the indictments pertain exclusively to administrative discourse, resurrecting anxieties that the statute can be utilized as an apparatus of administrative quelling. The foundational tribunal presently encounters a crucial examination. Malema's attorneys have petitioned, disputing that prosecuting administrative discourse contravenes foundational safeguards and that the Writers' Assembly statute is antiquated and unconstitutional when administered to tranquil administrative mobilization. South Africa's foundational manuscript safeguards autonomy of articulation but acknowledges constraints when entitlements encroach on associates' security. Administrative discourse relishes elevated safeguard, but the demarcation between fiery discourse and stimulation to instantaneous anarchic deed persists vague. International humanitarian entitlement standards reinforce that administrative discourse cannot be constrained capriciously, additionally confounding the instance. Chronology also contributes fascination. The apprehension arrives 18 intervals before countrywide ballots. The governing African National Congress has forfeited endorsement while the economic freedom fighters have progressively secured, particularly among youthful electors with no immediate recollection of apartheid. Surveys propose the F could replicate its legislative delegation, furnishing male substantial influence. Certain authorities dispute the apprehension could fortify his protagonist's chronicle. Associates propose it may provisionally constrain his campaign endeavors. Sectional mechanics within the ANC may also have swayed the chronology, accentuating that administrative computations rarely function autonomously of juridical responses. Malema's chronicle with the statute emphasizes his tenacity. In 2010, he was adjudicated of animosity discourse for vocalizing the anti-apartheid melody Jubel Ibhunu. In 2012, internal regulatory deliberations conducted to his ANC ejection. Since instituting the F, he has encountered recurrent juridical obstacles, incorporating depravity and currency cleansing allegations, preponderance of which were ultimately abandoned. He has recurrently converted juridical adversity into administrative benefit, escalating his prominence and authenticity among advocates. The implications for the subsequent ballot are tremendous. A adjudication could promote Malema to protagonist recognition, examining whether the F can advance without his corporeal attendance. A dismissal or abandoned indictments would authenticate his chronicle of administrative harassment, probably amplifying his endorsement. A protracted juridical mechanism could abandon him administratively dynamic while depicting himself as an administrative detainee, persistently galvanizing his foundation. Resistance factions have disclosed their tactical precedences in reaction. The Democratic Alliance accentuated the principle of statute while articulating apprehension about administrative quelling. The Freedom Front Plus overtly endorsed the prosecution, referencing possession entitlements. Radical assemblies such as the Socialist Revolutionary Workers' Party articulated solidarity, accentuating communal autonomies. This solitary apprehension has compelled every administrative performer to elucidate whether they precedence communal autonomies or equilibrium when the dual conflict. Social platforms has intensified these mechanics. Identifiers circulating internationally, footage and transmissions have metamorphosed networks like Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and WhatsApp into arenas of administrative controversy and demonstration synchronization. International solidarity has materialized from crusades such as Black Lives Matter in the US, Aboriginal entitlements initiatives in Latin America, and anti-regime factions in Europe, depicting Malema's apprehension as fragment of a more extensive arrangement of quelling youth-guided fiscal crusades. The apprehension has also rekindled controversies about South Africa's fiscal prototype. With joblessness formerly approximately 30%, prosperity concentrated among a restricted establishment and terrain still disproportionately allocated. Malema's advocacy for reallocation and monopolization resonates substantially. Commercial commanders caution of investment exodus and fiscal disintegration. While advocates dispute that the contemporary mechanism previously disappoints the preponderance. His juridical tribulations and fiscal agenda are profoundly intertwined. The prosecution itself accentuates the menace his philosophies constitute to the established arrangement. Youth galvanization has been extraordinary. Under 35 South Africans, numerous administratively detached are presently mobilizing, occupying educational facilities, documenting to ballot, and arranging demonstrations. Throughout Africa, youth crusades are supervising these episodes as illustrations of generational conflicts regarding administrative and fiscal dominion. This generational schism may become even more weighty than philosophical schisms. Juridical academics caution of more extensive ramifications. Interpretive understandings of stimulation could permit choosy prosecution, freezing administrative militancy throughout the range. International humanitarian entitlement structures also accentuate plausible contraventions if administrative discourse is penalized, lacking instantaneous causation of aggression. Yet authentic apprehensions about communal security persist, establishing pressure between safeguarding articulation and forestalling turbulence. Three principal situations control conjecture. Initially, adjudication and confinement could establish a protagonist character, examining the F's institutional tenacity. Subsequently, a dismissal or abandoned indictments could investigate Malema's prominence, authenticating his chronicle of harassment. Thirdly, protracted juridical uncertainty could abandon him administratively dynamic while displaying himself as a perpetual insignia of defiance. Each situation displays a distinctive obstacle to South African democracy, examining juridical, administrative, and communal tenacity. South Africa today is at a junction. Residents are interrogating whether institutions function fairness or safeguard embedded dominion. Advocates and adversaries similarly encounter elemental inquiries. What does democracy signify? How should arrangement and fairness be reconciled? Who adjudicates the territory's trajectory? International scrutiny accentuates the implications as South Africa's experimentation with establishing a representative equitable community is being attentively supervised throughout the international meridian. Whatever the tribunals adjudicate, Malema's apprehension has escalated controversies about terrain, prosperity, and administrative delegation. He has compelled the territory to encounter concerns it might alternatively have postponed. While the tribunals will adjudicate his instantaneous destiny, the administrative convulsion he has instigated will advance to configure South African administration for years, conceivably epochs, irrespective of whatever juridical